I call it the other fantasy land. So I have embraced almost every single thing that anybody could think of and tried it, and there's very, very little that I haven't found that I enjoyed. But it's kind of like, you know, this month it feels more like this. So, but it's like every single time I just, you know, people look at me and either I have this really, really intense look on my face or a smile on my face. And it kind of goes from one to the other. But I have never found anything in my life that can equal, you know, one-on-one time in a dungeon that gets really fucking intense. There's nothing in the world like that. There is no high, there's no drug, there's no alcohol. There is nothing in the world like that connection. It's absolutely amazing. So, I mean, I'm sure there'll be a new kink that one of you guys will probably teach me soon that I will go off and that'll be the next one. So I commented this morning, I've never done a scrotal inflation, so it's like, I need to do a scrotal inflation. A guy on recon said, I want to go to a scrotal inflation. It's like, okay, that sounds interesting. So one of you guys will have to teach me that so I can go off and do those. But it's interesting, I don't know if it's any different now, but you know, I am who I am because of you guys, because you took me aside and said, this is how you flog, this is how you single tail, this is how you put a catheter in, this is how you do temporary piercings. You know, you guys taught me one-on-one my craft. And so I still believe very strongly that that's the way it is today.
You were a sexy motherfucker and you showed up at our door.
Lucky me.
Come on.
Yeah, implied in all this is that once upon a time, Race and I were an item, and we were. That's true. My internal erotic configurations, I think, are a little different from yours in the following way. There are about 10 activities that I'm really good at, and I really enjoy. There are maybe another 10 that I know how to do, but don't really light my tree up. And there are maybe another 5 that I know how to teach, but I got no juice on them, you know? And if I'm going to really dance with somebody, I need to have at least 3 of those activities shared with the person, and I don't really care which 3 they are. As Brian has already disclosed, I'm pretty handy with a whip. But I also move in another world that you move in, and that's the master-slave world, which is a different world from the world of straightforward BDSM. Because they're the BDSM players who are weekend warriors and launch scenes in dungeons and have a great time, and that's fine. In the master-slave world, that engine never is turned off. Sometimes it runs at high RPMs, and sometimes it runs at really low RPMs, but the engine is always running, unless one or the other of them turns the engine off and throws the keys out the window. So you and I both operate in both of those worlds as well, because the master-slave ride and the BDSM radical sex ride, those are independent, but like a Venn diagram, they overlap for some people. And for Brian and I, and for you, all 3 of us, frankly, those worlds all overlap. That's one of the things that the 3 of us have in common.
So,
and that's cool. I like that about all 3 of us.
Who in the audience is running for a title soon? Raise your hand. Who in the audience has judged a contest before? Okay. This is related. Are there contests, this is for both of you, are there contest interview questions that should be forbidden to be asked by judges?
He's going to be smarter than I am, so we might as well just get it over with. Let him do it first.
I don't know that that's true. I couldn't design a house if my life depended on it, by the way.
Okay.
And you're probably a shitty therapist, so. I don't think that makes any one of us smarter than the other. I don't think the size of my cock is anybody's business unless I choose to disclose that. I don't think that the current state of my financial house is anybody's business, particularly. I do think my citizenship status is open for investigation.
Anything?
I told you I was going to steal it. The whole cock thing, it just like pisses me off every time that question gets asked. It's like, I don't know what that has to do with anything. Sometimes it seems like judges get overly interested or concerned in, are you a top or bottom? And I don't know what that has to do with anything at all, except that bottoms are generally better organized than we are. So they may make maybe better title holders. Every once in a while, I will see a judge ask a question that seems particularly personal and having absolutely nothing whatsoever besides, can you be gone and is your partner open relationship, and something that may be applicable to becoming a title holder. But yeah, these from left field questions, that's like, it's none of your fucking business and has nothing to do with my title. And I can't even give an example of one, but every once in a while it's like, why did you ask that question?
I sometimes call those gotcha questions. Because
if I'm head judge and I hear a question a judge ask in prejudging, one of those questions, before the next contestant comes out, I'm on that judge. Like, what the hell is that question about? What are you going for with that? And don't do that again in front of me.
Related to what you just...
cut your nuts off. In that tidy crock with all the other nuts I've
Your dance card either just filled up or emptied. I'm not sure which. Related to what you just said about the top-bottom thing, there was a time, I've been around a long time, and there was a time when I watched bottoms compete in contests, and before they walked out on stage, or before, the keys switched to the left. Exactly. That happened time and time again. Do you think there's still a bias one way, in other words, that's for some reason tops get a preference in judging in contests over bottoms? Or, heaven forbid, versatiles? I say that as a switch.
I would like to think that it doesn't, but this has happened to me more than once. I have had a submissive come to me and they are less than, and I get this whole, I'm this, I'm a worthless piece of shit, because then they need to talk to a guy, but they really feel that they are less than and not equal to, and so I'd like to think that doesn't exist anymore, but I think at some level, to some people, it still does. And I find that really disheartening, because we haven't done a very good job if that's still out there.
Go ahead, Guy.
Some years ago, there was a rule change at IML that said that people who judged IML could only judge the contest once. And that was fine at the time. Over time, what's happened, though, is that the pool of international level qualified judges has been exhausted. And so then it's second tier level qualified people with less experience. So each passing year, the qualifications of the judges, in terms of their experience judging, has been steadily reduced. And that then runs the risk that the judges are going to have less experience discerning exactly who ought to be anointed to do that job, to carry that cross for the following year. So with the advent of an increased amount of coaching that's gone on with contestants, the odds get greater that the wrong guys look really good on stage in front of the judges for that brief period of time. And that places the top tier titles at risk. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but it's something that I've watched over the last 10-year period, 10 or 12 years. And it's of concern not only to me, but to a number of other people who pay attention to the title system. The title system, whether it's the IML division or the ILSB system, and those are different horses, is really the only surviving institution we have from the original old days of leather. If you stop to think about it, our title system is older than a lot of leather bars. Leather bars? What are those? Because the leather bar population has shrunk tremendously. There are cities now that once had 2 or 3 or 4 places where you could run into leather guys every night of the week. And now there'll be a leather night once a month, or a uniform night once a month. Because the internet has changed the way that young people manage to connect with one another. So all of these things are influencing the way that the title system is evolving, and it's pretty fascinating to watch, I must say.
Guy, many people don't know that you had a title prior to IML. Can you explain the title you had prior to winning IML?
You talk about the Mr. NLA title?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the National Leather Association was created by a guy named Steve Madoff. And Steve had been an IML contestant and not won, went back to Seattle and realized that there was a need for a National Leather Association, some kind of an organization that people could become part of nationwide, and there would be different chapters all across the country. And Steve put that together, and they had a big teaching event called Living in Leather. And there were classes that they offered. I was part of that early faculty. Tony DeBlas. Some international level quality players were recruited to teach classes. And that was really the first sort of classroom instruction that was available to us, and they decided that they needed a title. And so there was a Mr. and Ms. National Leather Association, and that's the title that I went to Chicago with. The history of the drummer title is different. The first Mr. Drummer was a guy named Val Martin, who was chosen by the drummer organization to go to compete at IML. He was chosen, he was appointed. And Val had stepped off the plane from Argentina about 4 months earlier and barely spoke English. But he was the first Mr. Drummer. And then later Mr. Drummer got to be chosen as a consequence of a contest that was held. But originally he competed at IML.
So it's 1989, you've won your respective titles. My guess is some doors open for you that might not have opened for others. And I'm wondering what sort of doors might have opened that you think the title specifically did open for you.
A lot of hotel rooms. I guess, unlike guys here, I really, really, really enjoyed the sex. The nice thing was I had a partner in an open relationship, so I'd go see you, and he said, "Good, come home tired." So I with free conscience, would go out there. So it opened a lot of doors. But on the serious side, it gives you license to be involved in a cause, and they go, "Oh, you're Mr. Drummer, then you have credibility. So come on in." So there were a lot of things that I got to be a part of by virtue of my title that I probably would have knocked on the door and they never would have opened. So that part was really nice, that it did allow me to affect change in some ways that probably I couldn't have done as just me.
Yeah, the title guarantees that you have the attention of an audience for 15 seconds. That's it. And if you use those first 15 seconds carefully, then you can hold the attention of a room full of people. But that's really that's the door that the title opens for you. It buys 15 seconds of people's attention. Okay, maybe 9 seconds or maybe 22 seconds, but my point is that you have someone's attention long enough to earn their continued attention. And you better earn it in the first words that come out of your mouth, or else you're going to be dismissed as so much pretty fluff in pretty leather. That's the most important door. The doors that the title opened for me were in people's minds.
Okay.
And those for me are the most important doors that exist.
Again, for both of you, how are you different today because you won your title that you believe you might not be different had you not won the title?
I am who I am today. I can't even imagine who I would have been had this path not been followed in my life. It just continues to unfold and unfold and unfold, and it's all because of Bob. It's the slave that, you know, dragged me up to your house, and that adventure just continues and continues. But I mean, I can't even imagine what I'd probably be in some little retirement home in Des Moines or something.
I doubt that, but Guy, how about you?
Well, I was writing a monthly column for Drummer Magazine before I went after the titles. So my name was a household name in the leather world for about 3 years prior to that. People didn't know what I looked like. But there were a number of people. I was a first regular columnist that really looked inside the mind of leather sex. There were people who really care about that stuff would go to that column first when the Drummer Magazine came, and then turn to the classified section. The people that owned Drummer Magazine, Tony DeBlas and Andy Charles, at that time, they actually did demographic research, and they found that out, that people would read my column first. So I already had people's attention before I went after the title. And I don't know, one of the reasons that I wanted the title was that I knew, I mean, I'm not independently wealthy and never have been. I needed to take the pulse of the leather community. And I realized that the community was tremendously different from one side of the nation to the other, that the regional variation in our world was enormous. And here I was writing a column for a national magazine about people who were in Los Angeles. And I thought, that's not really smart or fair. So I need to get out into the country. I couldn't afford to travel myself. So I thought, I know, I'll win the damn IML title, and then sponsors will haul my ass from one end of the country to the other. And that's precisely what happened. The deal that I made with sponsors when they called me and said, would you come and judge our contest, was, yeah, provided that you let me talk to the audience for 4 minutes. So I blackmailed them.
That's not a bad idea.
I did. I blackmailed them. I will not come to judge your contest unless you let me talk to the audience at least once for 4 minutes. If you're not willing to do that, I can't be bothered to get on an airplane.
Did you two make appearances together the same year?
Never.
No? Really?
Never.
I don't even think we crossed paths at an airport, did we?
We never crossed paths.
Don't you find that strange?
A little bit. I ran into Susie.
Yeah, I would run into Susie as well. She was my sort of title wife. I was on the road that year 42 out of 52 weeks.
That's way more than me. So.
Yeah, but you were busy fucking from one end of the country to the other.
Just sort of an aside, I would beg them to let me come, because up until that...
No, you can't come, you can't come.
No, different kind of coming. All right. Evidently, you guys have done a great job on the IML side of credibility, but the drummer side needed a little more credibility. So if I want to take any credit for anything, is the fact that I worked really, really hard to make Mr. Drummer a credible title, and that I will show up, I'll do what you ask.
Almost.
I mean, I didn't do what they asked?
Yeah, I never saw you.
Within reason.
Remember how his mind works.
Okay, right.
I never saw you lick anybody's boots, Brian.
Yeah, okay. No, well, we all have limits. But there were a whole lot of T-shirts that got pulled off of me for charity that year.
Boy, that's true.
But that was what was really hard that year, and I ended up having to write the check myself, and much like you did in many cases. But it was hard to get a sponsor to go, come on down, we'll pay your way, sure. I go, look, I'll sleep on the couch. I don't care. I just want to come to your event. But it took a while to try and get Mr. Drummer kind of considered as the same level of title as IML, because we weren't there yet.
Yeah, you're the guy that did that.
I tried.
By the way, you're the guy that conferred some credibility because it meant that you were smart. I mean, you were the first professional person to hold the title. I was the first professional person to hold the IML title. What happened here?
Just talk right into it.
I was the first professional person to hold the IML title, but there were others. Tony Mills came after. Woody B. Bout was an attorney. Because for a long time, the people who were interested in the title system were thought to be not smart, not capable, not worth paying attention to other than the fact that they were pretty. All of a sudden, there were people with brains who could think and reason and read and make jokes and be amusing and entertaining, but who could also think seriously about issues. Suddenly, we were more than just a group of people who were twisted jack-offs. We actually could think and reason and read, and were concerned about larger issues than the ones between our legs. And you're the guy that did that for Drummer. Thank you.
You alluded to the cost. We've actually heard the cost of being a title holder a number of times in this discussion. Do you think it's right, and I'm curious, maybe I injected a bit of bias in that question, do you think it's right that title holders have to spend their own money when they win a title to travel?
Well, it depends. If I have a local title and my producers and sponsors are expecting me to travel to cities in the region in order to represent their bar title, for example, then I think the local sponsors ought to foot the bill for that. If you want me to carry your bar's name to the next town, put me up in a damn hotel and give me some mileage so that I don't have to impoverish myself to do that. If you want me to go to Chicago and compete, cover my costs or don't have a contest. One of the reasons that a lot of local producers like title stuff is it gives people an unusual reason to come to their bar and spend money. It's a commercial draw. And you don't have to like that that's true, but you have to admit that it is true. And if they have a financial interest in having bar titles, then they need to walk the talk. I have a hard time with title holders being expected to raise money and treating themselves as a charity. And I know that there's a spirited, ongoing conversation in the country about this issue, and shame on you for sucking us into that.
How about you?
I pretty much entirely agree. And while it may not be appropriate for some to go like, can you afford the title this year, but it really is the heart of the matter. I mean, I probably went through about $20,000 as well. And I would ask, I would beg, but in the end, I would foot the bill myself if I felt it was really important for me to go. And then it's like, can you at least not charge me anything? Can I sleep on somebody's, I'll pay the plane ticket to get there, but then I need something to offset it. But I'm not quite as hard set on, you have to go into this knowing that you're going to have to be clever with your year. And so come up with something, maybe you split it with a charity or something. It's kind of hard, it's like, send me to Bolivia, please, join my charity. But it's either a really good sponsor, you've got to have some money, or you got to get out there and do something for somebody that they think is worth them contributing you to.
One of my pet peeves, and if you heard the keynote speech I gave at the at the Leather Leadership Conference a couple of years ago, and anybody who wants to see that speech can do so on YouTube. I'm really tired of us raising money for this charity and that charity and that charity and, Meals on Wheels and infants with cancer and all that stuff. I want that to stop. We are a worthy charity. We need our own money. There are all kinds of things that we need to do in our world that are pricey. We have the Leather Archives and Museum in Chicago that has just finally been able to acquire a new archivist, and there is boxes of stuff there that needs to be gone through, needs to be cataloged, needs to be protected and preserved for posterity, and that is not going to happen unless there's money that flows toward them. There's a big gay and lesbian archive in Los Angeles. There's another one in Chicago or San Francisco. And we're a worthy charity. Why are we busy? Are we busy trying to buy acceptability for radical sexuality by supporting Meals on Wheels? And somehow I've begun to think that we're a little guilty about being kinky, that we feel like we have to purchase acceptability by raising money for this charity and that charity and the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which gets money from the goddamn government, for fuck's sake. We're a worthy charity. We need for this money. The NCSF, if they ever get their due diligence crap sorted out, needs money for important activities that are protect and defend our rights in a legal way. That's what I think title holders ought to be raising money for. We may not be fighting AIDS in the same way that we were in 1990, and in fact we're not, but that doesn't mean that we don't need each other and that we don't have work to do. There's work to do. And for those guys who just want to be on stage and look pretty in brand new leather, buckle down, kids. I mean it. No, I'm pissed. I'm angry about this. My blood's up. Not this blood, this blood.
Is there something about you that people would be surprised about if you told them? Some part of Brian or Guy, both of you. We all heard that. No, I mean, it's anything that would surprise us, because the assumption is that you both live 24/7 in a dungeon. That's what you do, isn't that what big title holders and famous leathermen do? And what would...
You do. You have a dungeon in your home, don't you?
Yeah. There's a dungeon behind the garage. I don't think it's a surprise, because I generally have the first words out of my mouth, but I am not a 24/7 in the dungeon guy. I still work part-time. I live in a wonderful neighborhood that is very blended, and the reason that we throw such swell parties is because there's enough gay men on the planning committee. But it looks like Mayberry RFD. I generally am at a baseball game with my grandkids on Saturday and then in the dungeon Saturday night. But I don't know that people understand that. It's like I really, probably in the shopping, when I go shopping at the grocery store, I look like a regular old guy. So I don't know if that's unusual or
I think
not.
it would surprise some people. They just assume. Guy?
It's the dresses. No.
Remember, we were partnered. I have secrets.
It better be good or he's going to have one better.
You don't have any secrets. Fuck you.
Okay.
I don't know. I live my life really congruently. I've been an out practicing sadomasochist since I was a teenager. I've never hidden that fact. It cost me my family of origin. But most of those people aren't people who I would choose to be friends with under any circumstances anyway. So I don't feel like that's been a loss. I've always used my real name. I mean, what you see is what you get, triplets and all, I miss being able to occupy the body that I occupied when I won, because I had an 8-pack. I feel like the old lady in Titanic. Wasn't I a dish? You remember when she says to her granddaughter, she's on the ship, and the drawing is appearing, and she shows her granddaughter the pencil drawing, and she turns to her granddaughter and she says, "Wasn't I a dish?" That feels like me. I'm that guy. And it was nice wearing a muscle suit. I worked hard for it, and it was great fun. And so there's a bit of a loss that goes with that. Once you've been that thing, to then sort of move through life in a different shell is a very different experience for me that nothing prepared me for. I walk through the halls here, and I'm invisible to most people. And I never was before, I walk through the hall, and people go, and you too, well, you still do that, you fucker. And I miss being able to turn heads. That was fun, I must say.
When he was running for his title, we had lunch at the Park Pantry in Long Beach, and I don't even know why, but my daughter was with me. I don't know if you remember having lunch there. My daughter was with me, and that's when she met Guy Baldwin. And I think you ordered a dozen hard-boiled eggs, cut them in half, took the yolk out, ate the whites of a dozen eggs, and my daughter sat there going like this. So in my daughter's eyes, you still have the 8-pack, because that's how she remembers. Because I talk about Guy Baldwin, she remembers you that way.
I have a funny IML story to tell, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have time for this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I want to give about 20 minutes for questions, but go ahead.
I wanted the job. I really wanted the damn job, hard. And the last 6 weeks, I lived on nothing but 6 cans of tuna packed in water and 3 packages of sodium-free rice cakes and 2 gallons of distilled water every day for 6 weeks. That's all I ate. And my skin was like tissue paper thin. The morning of the contest, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in the hotel suite, and I looked at what I had done to myself. And I could visually take my pulse by looking at my abdomen, because there was a vein in my abdomen that I could see pulsing, and it scared the hell out of me. But I was determined. So the night that we went to the theater, to the Old Vic, I packed, along with all my leather and changes and stuff, 6 cans of tuna and 4 packages of rice cakes and 2 gallons of distilled water, because I didn't want to mess with my diet, right? So we're in rehearsal, and there were delays. We couldn't go to lunch. We couldn't go to lunch. We couldn't go to lunch. Rehearsal drug on and drug on and drug on. And the guys were starting to get hungry. And so I took my can opener out and I ate, my can of tuna, and I ate some rice cakes. And I then lifted my head up to the guys who were in the room there waiting, the other contestants. And I said, fellas, I know that some of you are hungry. I said, I brought some tuna fish, and I have some rice cakes and some water if anybody's hungry. And way on the other side, and I don't know who said it, somebody said, really, Baldwin, you brought fish and loaves? Completely went right over my head. I hadn't realized what I was doing and saying. It was pretty funny.
Soon thereafter, he parted the Red Sea.
We all just fell apart laughing.
I think that's a great point at which to see if there's any questions. So does anybody raise your hand if you have a question for either Guy or for Brian? Anyone? Let's you second. You first.
Yeah, I just read Guy's book a couple days ago.
Which one? I'm going to repeat the question because we are recording it, so go ahead.
Ties That Bind, and I found a lot of things that I related to without a lot of pretense from the leather community, just me growing up as a boy. And I was so surprised to find that that book had been written in the early 90s. I couldn't believe it. And so I was just wondering.
It wasn't written in the early 90s.
Okay, when was it?
Those was a compilation of essays.
Let me just say, since we are recording, he's asking about Guy Baldwin's book, Ties It Binds, and how relevant it is today, and now Guy is going to talk about it.
Those was a collection of essays that I started writing in 1986 and stopped writing in 1992 when Drummer magazine changed hands and became the possession of someone I no longer respected, and I stopped writing for them. When I was on the road during my IML year, people would say, when are you going to have your essays collected in a book? And I said, I'm not going to have my essays collected in a book. They don't mean that much. They're not that important. I used to refer to them as toilet reading because there were 2,000 word limit, and that's about as much time as it takes to take a healthy dump, you know?
I call that a tweet now.
A tweet? Oh, okay. And so the only reason I published Ties That Bind is to keep people shut the hell up about it. I did it in self-defense. Anyway, your question is?
I was wondering if you felt from the essays you wrote from that time period, if any big themes have changed, or if you would have changed any of the essays.
So he's asking if any themes have changed from when you originally wrote those essays and to today.
Yeah, there are 2 essays I would do differently. The essay on punishment, I would have different things to say about, and most especially the essay on humiliation, I would have different things to say about, because I've learned more about those things since I wrote that stuff, and I would rewrite those 2 chapters if my publisher gave me the opportunity to. Yeah.
I saw a hand over here. Can you interpret?
Thank both of you, because as basically from a child, coming up in the 80s, I was always reading Drummer, I was reading every book I could find. But since when you were talking about AIDS fundraising, it really doesn't do what we're supposed to be doing anymore. With HIV and all the AIDS fundraising that we were doing for years ago, that was one of the big things. But now I agree that it really doesn't hold as much as that used to. But I just want to thank you for that.
The audience member thanked both gentlemen, and that did I say it correctly, that the AIDS fundraising that we did was very important, and he is thanking them specifically for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, without that, I would not be here today.
Thank you. However, there are still fights to fight, particularly with regard to PrEP. And if there's anybody in the room who doesn't know about PrEP, who's especially a title holder, you need to know about the conversation that's unfolding across the country now about PrEP. And that is a fight for lives. And anybody who doesn't understand it in those terms is not paying attention. And that's, you know, to say that the big battle is over is not over. That's the fight that's happening right now. And you guys, you know, for whatever it may be worth to you, I charge you all now with the responsibility to go out and do that work, because your communities need it. You will save lives. It matters. There's a lot at stake.
Talking about leather contests, I've been through many of them, not only IML or drummer, but like Master Slave. And you guys were talking about coaching, and I thought you guys were not coached before you go or whatever. But now, I know people that go into it, and they were coached so much. Like even they had, like I had some friend, they had 5 people with them in the contest to tell them what to say, what to do the whole contest, the whole 3 days, and they won. And I was kind of pissed. I felt like, you know, they're not for real, because I know them. I know this is not what they normally do. This is not the way they walk. This is not the way they talk. So I felt like kind of, you know, they are fake.
So the gentleman asked in short about coaching of title holders and whether it is appropriate or not. Let me sum it up that way. Gentlemen?
You know, oops, I'm sorry. It's interesting. All right, I'll get it down. It is up to the coaches to ascertain if they're working with anything that is worth coaching. And if the bar is so desperate for somebody to go into the title, then I think it would be okay for the bar to pass. But I can appreciate what you're saying, that when they're so produced that as soon as they don't have the 5 guys around them, they're going to fall on their face. So I completely believe, because I had the good fortune of people being behind me, but at some point I had to, you know, cut bait and swim.
But they were also doing things that they normally don't do. There was a Master Slave conference, and they don't normally do that. I know them. So that was, you know, I'm fine if you get coached and be better, because this is what happened to you.
Well, I have never attended a Master Slave contest, and I never will. I disapprove of them entirely. And the reason is that I believe it's very difficult to judge a single person, a title holder. As a judge, prejudging, it's tough enough to evaluate one person. To evaluate a relationship seems completely impossible to me, and an insult. So I do not subscribe to relationship competitions. I disapprove of them entirely. I've refused to judge them. I want no part of them. Which is an extreme point of view. I understand. They go on out there. But I'm a therapist. It's hard, you know, when a couple comes into the therapy room and they have issues, it can take me 3 or 4 visits before I feel like I've got a fix on what the hell's going on with those people. If then. And as a judge and prejudging, I'm supposed to evaluate a master-slave team on the basis of a 20-minute interview? Not possible. So there's that. As for coaching itself, I disapprove of coaching. I've coached one contestant in my life. It wasn't you. No, I didn't coach you. I did not coach you. I didn't coach you. I was a judge. I would never have coached you.
I understand that. I just followed you around.
No, I mean, no. I just, when I knew you wanted to go after the drummer title, I kept my distance because that protects the integrity of the event. No, I disapprove of coaching, and the reason I do is that when you're out there as the winner, you don't have a team behind you. The judges need to see what your capabilities are for carrying the water all by your sweet self. And if you are a produced person, and we've had them, oh my God, in both divisions, I mean, your predecessor was a completely produced object. He was a beautiful guy. Oh my God. This was one of the most beautiful men I've ever clapped eyes on in my life. And he was entirely the product of some people in Ohio, as it turns out. And he didn't know how to talk. He didn't know how to walk. He didn't have an idea in his head that wasn't put there by his producers. You know, I sat next to him at the judging table when I was judging your show, and Tony DeBlas, who owned the drummer competition, came up and said to him, you want to give a step-down speech? And he was so terrified, he said, absolutely, I do not want to speak. Completely produced. So, no, I'm not in favor of coaching.
This gentleman, and then...
Speaking of which, he was always by himself during the contest. He always to the side. And he was my predecessor for the Midwest drummer. I went over to him, and I won't say his name.
No, I didn't either.
And I asked him, I said, why are you always by yourself? He said, I don't belong here.
Wow.
And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I'm packaged. I don't even know why I'm here. He said, I didn't even expect to win international. And he actually admitted that.
Yeah. The nice thing about it is they only have to be a placeholder for 1 year. And if they do nothing that brings dishonor upon the title for 1 year, they don't get too much shit from me about that. Because sometimes that's what the judges give us, is a placeholder. And we've had lots of those over the years.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. You have a question?
For drummer, I remember it was a very extensive interview. For IML, I believe it's 7 minutes.
I think there's 12 minutes allotted per contestant. Chuck left the room. And
He's mad at me.
and I think that amounts to about 7 or 8 minutes of the judges asking questions.
Yeah, Chuck's mad at me.
Judge, do you find it very difficult to interview someone in 7 minutes versus it was for drummer, where we had much more time to interact with the judges?
Well, you judged IML recently.
2005 was when I judged IML.
That's recently.
The grand
sorry.
scheme of things, I guess.
I'm old.
I'm old, whatever.
2005 seems recently to me.
I'll give you my 2 cents. I honestly believe that I cannot properly assess anyone in even 20 minutes. I'm going to be honest. I think that's why contests are to some extent a crapshoot. And 7, 8 minutes, even less so. But that's the reality of judging 56 contestants.
When I was on the road out judging contests, which occasionally I still do, if I owe somebody a favor, I will do that. And typically I'm the head judge in that situation. I always sit at one end of the judging table, and I wait to listen to what the other judges ask. And if I perceive something about the contestant that I think the other judges have missed, then and only then will I craft a question designed to address that thing. But all judges are not obligated to ask anything. And it makes contestants nervous when they don't hear a question from every single judge. But sometimes judges don't need to ask questions in order to make their mind up about somebody.
And they have the option to skip.
And
It's
they
very
have the
common
option
for a
to
judge to say, I skipped this. Do you have any thoughts on?
Oh, it just, I mean, think about, I mean, I only judged IML one time, but there were like 60 some odd contestants. Holy shit, how can you evaluate anybody? You've read your bio, you've done your due diligence, you've looked online, you've done everything you can to come prepared. But it's insane. It really is insane. The fact, I think it's remarkable that we get the right guy as often as we do.
That's true. There was a question here.
This is primarily for Brian, although you guys you ran and won a very public title with a family behind you and coming to. What were the challenges to your family with your children and the repercussions, both good and bad, of being such a public figure?
So this question is primarily at Brian, but to both, but primarily to Brian. The challenges of running for such a public title with a family and other familial obligations to consider.
I don't know if anybody saw the layout, the day in the life of me, or Mr. Drummer, or whatever it was called. My kids were in that photo. I mean, enormously proud of my kids. They were shot from behind, and all you could see was the fact that there was a child there. But I wanted people to know that it was okay to be who I was. You know, there's a shot of me at the drafting table, I think, or something. So it's okay to be a professional, to have a family, to have all of this, and still be, you know, kinky too. So that was really important to me. But going into that, full disclosure to my kids, to my ex-wife, I mean, everybody knew about it going, so you can't come back at me because they all know. So nobody could ever blackmail me with any of that stuff.
The world is not as dangerous a place as people like to make it out to be. It's a much safer place than folks are willing to suspect, which isn't to say that there are no dangers. That's not true. One of the reasons that a lot of people, particularly in the het world, use scene names is that they fear disclosure because there are minor children involved. And I understand their desire to keep their identities safe because as the laws are currently configured in this country, a parent who is known to the authorities to practice these kinds of erotic behaviors is at risk for losing their children. That's just true. I don't like that it's true, but it is true. And so those people need to protect their children at all costs. That's the obligation of parenthood under every circumstance. But other than that exception, I think people need to be congruent, meaning that the outside needs to match the inside. The reason that there's a tidal wave of change around marriage laws in the United States today is because people came out. Honesty has the capacity to change the world. And we're now confronted with abundant evidence that that's true. Now, some people are more fearless than others. That's always going to be true. But the world we are winning and we will win. Time is always on our side. As long as we are fearless and relentless, we are winning and we will win. No question about it.
I think we have time for one more audience question. I saw a hand up here, correct? Go ahead.
Again, just to thank both of you for being here. This has been an incredibly fabulous experience. Quick question related somewhat to what you see in contestants today versus in the past. Do you think that we simply have too many contests now to fill them with quality contestants?
So the question is essentially, do we have too many contests today, and do we have enough qualified contestants to fill all of those slots in all of those contests? Is that what you're doing? Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
No, you first.
No, not really. I guess it's personal opinion that we probably have a few too many contests, and I don't know that there are that many they're not qualified even, people that care and are passionate about it, and they will ultimately be qualified if they really are passionate. So possibly there are too many. I mean, because there does seem to be a, you know, a Mr. or Ms. whatever contest. And so maybe we should drill it down a little bit and try and go for the big punch. And, you know, let's all talk about it. And it's like, what are we trying to accomplish here? And, you know, if it's a smaller town and you've got all these diverse titles, maybe we should try and pull together a little bit and see if you can get some, you know, real impact. Again, it's just sort of an opinion on it.
Titles do different things in different places. Chicago doesn't need a title. Los Angeles doesn't need a title. There are plenty of systems in place in Los Angeles to educate people who are interested in the lifestyle. We are in LA, there's an embarrassment of educational riches. But in places like Des Moines, or, well, is somebody here from Des Moines?
Des Moines actually got a really good one.
Well, my point is that in places like Des Moines and Fort Collins, Colorado, and Lubbock, Texas, and Indianapolis, the title holder in those situations performs a different function than they do in big cities. San Francisco doesn't need a title holder. They've got a bunch. LA has 9, or 10 this year, sorry. And one of the reasons that we have a big local event is so that Los Angeles doesn't send 10 contestants to Chicago. Can you imagine how embarrassing that would be? Well, no, seriously. Not to mention expensive. So we only send one guy, just so that we can let the rest of the country know that we've still got our hand in the game. But the need for titles in smaller places is operationally and functionally different than it is in bigger places. My overall answer to your question is I don't know. Show me the situation and I'll be able to answer, because I think it's be dangerous to paint that with a really broad brush. I don't know whether it is or not. I know that one of the cool things about the title system is it gives people who know they are outlaws the opportunity to have an experience with leadership and representation as outlaws, as outlaws. And that can't be bad, because the fact that we're perverts doesn't mean that we're not smart, that we don't have leadership capabilities, that we can't be representational, that we are, you know, we're no count. And the title system gives people a chance to be themselves, to be congruent, and to display their wares, their personality wares. And that's not a bad thing.
We're just about out of time. I don't have any more time for questions because I'm going to ask the last question. Ala James Lipton, he has this list of 10 questions. And I'm not going to ask all 10. We don't have time. But the final one is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
Okay. Guy? Are you assuming you're going somewhere else?
What the hell are you doing knocking on my door? No, what I'd like to hear God say is thank you.
And on that note, thank you.